Does the title of Matt Ridley's new book, The Rational Optimist, sound like an oxymoron to you? Is it reasonable to envision a positive future for this world of diminishing natural resources and increasing population? Matt Ridley claims that not only is life for most people improving at an accelerating rate, but that it should continue to do so. His book is published by HarperCollins, and I'm very pleased that it brings him to our show today. Hello.
Good morning.
Isn't the optimist always at a disadvantage, struggling to be taken seriously?
You're right that pessimism is considered somehow wiser. John Stuart Mill said that the man who despairs when others hope is regarded as a sage.
And you say that all one has to do to get a MacArthur Genius Award or a Nobel Peace Prize is to claim disaster is imminent. That sounds more cynical than optimistic to me.
Well, I have to say, I am, to some extent reacting against the amount of pessimism that's been thrown at me in my life, particularly coming of age in the 1970s when we really were told to expect the end of oil, the population explosion, famines around the corner, an epidemic of cancer caused by chemicals in the environment, all these kind of things, which all turned out to be either untrue or exaggerated. And so to some extent, yes, I am cynical when I hear projections of imminent catastrophe.
On the other hand, people who predicted that the housing bubble couldn't go on forever when everyone else was saying that housing prices would continue to go up, who predicted that the banking bubble was going to collapse, they now turn out to be the ones who are the neglected geniuses.
It's certainly true that in some financial bubbles, in speculative bubbles, there is too much blind optimism around. I would not call that rational optimism. I wouldn't call that based on common sense, as it were. And we just seem to find it very hard to learn the lessons that bubbles do pop in finance. But I don't believe that that's necessarily the same thing as arguing about the future of the planet and the future of humanity and the future of living standards.
So let's talk about how you say life has improved. How much has life expectancy increased?
Well, in my lifetime, life expectancy globally, across the whole planet, including Africa, is up around 30%. And it's increasing globally at around 5 hours a day. That is to say, every day you live longer, it means that you will increase your lifespan by 5 hours. It's increasing at a faster rate than that in places like China, maybe 8 hours a day. That's an extraordinary achievement, and it's been running for about 200 years. I mean, we've roughly doubled average life expectancy in 200 years. A lot of that is by stamping out early mortality, premature mortality. But the remarkable thing, too, is that people were saying, well, yes, but that's just at the expense of giving people a lot of illness at the end of their life. That's not proving to be the case either. If you interview people in their 80s, they're not miserable or unhappy or ill, most of them. In fact, to some extent, there's a compression of morbidity going on. That's to say people spend a longer time living and a shorter time dying.
But it is more likely that we're going to have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or strokes when we get older.
Yeah, strokes is a good example. It's a disease that increases dramatically with age. It's more likely at age, but it's getting later and later that it strikes. In other words, a lot of the projections made in the 80s about the number of strokes that would be happening in the population because of increasing age have proved to be very wide of the mark. They've actually been much lower than that because strokes are coming later.
You mentioned that life expectancy is up in Africa as well. Well, let's expand that to South America and parts of Asia. It's still not like it is in the Western world, and also there are places in the world where wars continue to grind on, like Congo, and that lowers life expectancy as well. And I don't see much improvement.
Well, you're right that Africa has had a diminution of life expectancy because of the AIDS epidemic. That has largely turned around in the last 3 or 4 years in most countries. It is starting to tick up. I mean, when I say that life expectancy is up globally, that's an average. But Africa, yes, has had a couple of very bad decades. And yes, Africa has poverty, malnutrition, hunger, war on a terrible scale. And I am not saying that the world is perfect, and I'm certainly not saying it's good enough. I'm saying quite the reverse, that if we take seriously the need to improve the world more than we do now, then one of the ways we've got to do that is to realize just how much better it could get.
Because you say we have more tools to improve it.
Yes, my basic argument is that what causes human prosperity is the process of exchange and specialization, which means that we end up working for each other. So you only have to know how to do one thing in exchange for which everyone else will do everything else for you. And that's true of all of us. We're all exchanging and specializing and working for each other. And that's what causes the rising living standards of everybody. And that causes innovation and technology. And it's from technology, obviously, that most of these improvements come.
In the book, you compare the quality of life 50 years ago with that of today. How much better off are we, in your estimation?
Well, if you control for inflation, we're roughly 3 times richer in per capita GDP as a human race than we were when I was born in the late 1950s. That's to say we produce goods and services to 3 times the value for each other that we did. Now, you can say, well, that doesn't measure everything, and of course it doesn't. There's quality of life issues, etc. But a lot of those have improved rather than got worse. Things like pollution in many areas, things like inequality, which is falling globally.
I don't believe in astrology, but whenever I get into conversations like this, the Libra in me starts rearing its ugly head, and I always hear the other side of everything. And that is a problem when you talk about these things, because somebody is going to come up with an awful lot of examples of the opposite being true.
You're right. I'm an Aquarian. I don't know what that makes me. I don't know enough about astrology, and as you said, like you, I don't believe in it. But yes, it is a surprisingly uphill struggle to draw attention to the bright side of life. It somehow seems cynical or uncaring. That's not what I intend to be at all. Mind you, there are differences according to which side of the Atlantic you're on. To some extent, when I go to California, people say, duh, we think the world's getting better. Of course we do. Whereas when in Europe, it's even worse. It's places like Russia, you're just not allowed to be optimistic. It's against the law.